All right, so first thing we're going to do, guys, so this is kind of where we hope to end, okay? As you guys can see on this one, I've already started with the Sharpie marker. So this is sort of like our end goal, okay? You can see all these measurements here. You can even see some of my lines that I erased and fixed still there, but that stuff will all get erased away, okay? So this is what I'm starting with, a blank piece of paper. So the first thing we need to do, and what I like to do with these shoes, I actually like to start at the very bottom of the shoe, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my shoe, and I'm actually going to just put it right here on top of my paper like this. You guys can all do that with me, okay? And actually, the camera isn't really showing you this that well. It's interesting. So my shoe is smaller. It's not as wide as the paper, but when you look at it at the camera, it does look like it's wider than the camera, or up on the board. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mark on my paper, basically, the two ends. Now, if your shoe is bigger than the paper, my suggestion to you is to basically, I'm going to start kind of down here, is just create two marks like this at the bottom of your paper, not all the way at the bottom, but I'd say like a couple inches from the bottom like this. Try to make these kind of dark. I'm about an inch away from the edge of the paper, and I'm about 2 inches from the bottom. So make marks like that. Those of you that have shoes that are smaller than the paper, you can just put your shoe right on top of there and mark both ends. And I'll kind of zoom into this so you guys can see what that looks like. I'm at the bottom of the paper. I'm about an inch away from the left and the right side, and I'm about 2 inches from the bottom. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to draw a line that connects these two marks across. Now notice I'm not using a ruler. I'm doing that on purpose, okay? So it doesn't really, it needs to be mostly straight, but it doesn't need to be perfectly straight, because if you guys do look at the bottom of your shoe, it's not a straight line at all. So again, this line that I'm drawing is about 2 inches from the bottom. So I'm not all the way down at the bottom. I've got some space there. Now I know that a lot of your guys' paper is a little wrinkled. It will flatten out even more over time as we work on these. Now remember, you guys are using 4H pencils. Keep your lines nice and light. Do not put any pressure down on your pencil so that you're indenting the paper. I'm going to be doing the exact opposite of what I just told you, just so it can show up on the screen well. So I'm just using a regular pencil. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to divide this space in half. So this is actually our first drawing technique, finding the midpoint. So what I want to do is actually find the middle of my drawing space first, and then I'm going to try to figure out where that midpoint is on the actual shoe. So all I'm going to do is take my fingers on both ends here, and I'm just going to drag them to the middle, and I'm just going to make a mark like that. So yes, I am guessing. I am not taking a ruler and measuring how wide this is and dividing it by 2. I'm just eyeing this. And I'm going to always check my measurement here just to make sure I don't need to fix it. And of course, I'm going to look at it too. A lot of times too, what I'll do is I'll just kind of compare the first half to the back half and just see if it's the right size. Need to just scoot it over a little bit. So I can just compare even to front half to the back half to see if it's about even. So this is finding the midpoint. So right now we're just finding the midpoint of the space that we've determined that we're going to draw our shoe in. So now what I want to do is I need to find the middle of my actual shoe, okay? So what I'm going to do, and I'll stand up and do this out there in the middle of the classroom too, but I want to get it on the camera. I'm literally going to take my fingers, I'm going to put them on either side of the shoe, very similar to the way that I did on the paper, and I'm just going to slide them here to the middle, and I want to see where that midpoint is. Now, a lot of times what's nice is once I find where that is, a lot of times I can find a shoelace that's either close or right on that midpoint, and that will always be sort of my landmark that I'm going to use for that information, okay? So when I did that, my midpoint is aligned with this shoelace hole right there. So that way I don't have to continue to keep finding the midpoint every time. So I'm going to use that landmark, okay? So it's supposedly this is where that mark is on my paper, okay? So this is where that mark is, okay? So again, put my hands both sides of the shoe, and I just slide them into the middle. And I'm looking for a landmark. It's something that I can just sort of say, okay, this spot right here marks my midpoint. Okay, so I'm looking for a landmark. Okay, did everybody find their middle? Okay. So now what I'm going to do, and this is something I like to do that helps me just even get a feel for that midpoint and how it relates to my shoe. I'll put my pencil right up on my shoe like this, where that middle point is, and what I'm looking for, because we're starting at the bottom of the shoe, I'm looking for how it relates to the arch of the shoe. So if you look at this, it's kind of hard for me to hold this, but I'm going to try. The arch of the shoe actually happens after that midpoint, okay? Happens after. There's a little bit right there, but it happens after. So again, taking my pencil, putting it right here, and I'm trying to figure out how does that relate to the arch of my shoe. So that's that curved part that you see sort of in the middle of the shoe at the bottom, okay? We can see where that is. And for me, mine is to the right of that midpoint. Okay, so my arch is to the right of that midpoint. So what I'm going to do, and I got a little bit that goes past it, now I'm going to start drawing the arch. And it's just like a hump. And if you want to, you can even measure the exact size of that. Actually, I need to make it longer. If you're doing the other side, then you won't have that. I would recommend that you do the other side with the arch. So that's a good question. If you're not looking at that arch in the shoe, on the inner part of the shoe, I would turn your shoe so you have it, because that's a really helpful landmark. It's a great way to kind of break up the sole of the shoe too, especially if you've got a lot of shapes, kind of a fancier sole. Huh? Yeah, I would do that. It won't change your length of the shoe. Your shoe's still the same length. All right, now, so that's what I've got so far. Now, for your shoe, now if you look at the sole of your sole of your shoe is not perfectly straight. Even if you think it's straight, it's not straight. It's not designed that way, okay? To make this look very three-dimensional, what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you here real quick. Or here, I'll wait till everybody's got their arch on there. And I'm going to zoom in on this too so we can see this a little bit better. So then what I'm going to do, raise this up, so those of you in the back can see this. So I'm at the bottom of the shoe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to curve the back or the heel of the shoe like this. And I'm going to start the curve here. I'm just really going to do the heel for right now. Now, for some of you guys, you might notice that your shoe has a lot of curve to it. So you might be making that a little bit more exaggerated or extreme. Some of you guys who may not have as shapely of a sole of your shoe might be going for maybe a slight curve. And again, this is something that you can play with. I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of play with that. And here's the other thing, too, that I think is important to say, is that whenever I'm drawing, regardless of what I'm drawing or how it's going, I'm always banking on the fact that what I've just drawn is wrong. Okay? I'm just banking on that. I'm assuming that every line that I'm drawing right now is wrong. Because what I'm basically doing is I'm taking what I would like to call an educated guess at where this stuff is. I'm not going to know if I'm right until I continue to move on through the drawing and I see the other parts to the drawing, and then I can compare and contrast how they look together. But then I fix it. So I'm constantly fixing. But I think the key here is that if you do see that it doesn't look right, there's nothing to worry about. It's in pencil. You just fix it. Me, I'm banking on the fact that everything I'm doing is wrong. I find that if I look at it that way, it's easier for me to just deal with it. Okay, so now what I'm going to talk about is the front of the shoe. So if you look at the front of the shoe on your table, so we're talking about where the toes are. So if you look at your shoe, at the front of the shoe, a lot of you guys should notice that your shoe, at some point towards the front of it, lifts off the ground. So look at it. Do you see the very front of the shoe lift up off the ground or the table? Okay. That's a design that's actually been purposely put into the shoe. If you notice, you'll see the same thing happening at the very end of the shoe too. So the very end of the shoe doesn't even sit on the table. Okay? And that's designed so that it makes it comfortable for you to walk and run. Okay? It's not good to be in just very flat shoes. Okay? So what I need to do is I need to figure out where that lifts off, where my shoe, what point of this beginning part here, actually lifts off the ground. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take, and I'm not even looking at my shoe right now, I'm going to take my space that I have here. So I'm going to take the front half, I'm going to divide it in half again. I'm going to make a little mark. I'm going to do the same thing with the back. Divide this in half, make a mark. So now I've basically divided my shoe into four equal spots. I'm seeing some things that need to be adjusted. And see if you guys notice, when I did this, it's causing me to fix some things. And that's what's kind of, I think, good about drawing, is that every time I add something new to it, it causes me to realize something else that I need to fix and adjust, and it just helps me make the drawing better. So it's a good thing. There, I fixed it. I had to move my midpoint. Okay, so now I've got my shoe, the bottom of my shoe divided into four equal spots. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to my shoe, okay? Remember that landmark I told you guys to remember? So where's the middle of my shoe? Mine is aligned with this shoelace right here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at my shoe and divide the front of it in half. And I'm going to see, okay, how does that relate to where the liftoff is on the bottom? Okay? So again, taking my shoe, taking where the middle of it is, okay, which is right there. I'm going to divide it in half, figure out where that is, and how that relates to where that liftoff is. And what I noticed is that it lifts off actually before that mark for me. Everybody's shoe, again, is going to be different. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to connect this. And then I'm just going to draw this out. And notice how I'm kind of playing with that line. I actually started going up too high, didn't like it, so I'm changing how I'm working with that edge or that angle. I'm going to erase that line that I started drawing initially. Now also too, if you guys look at how I'm drawing this, my lines are kind of thick. And the reason why they're thick is I like to go in with my eraser and kind of play around with their angles a lot of times. Gives me a little bit more media to kind of play around with, and I'll go in and I'll kind of just use my eraser to clean it up when I'm ready to kind of settle or just kind of cement that edge a little bit more. And I'll continue to kind of play around with these. I'm always constantly going back and playing with these angles and stuff. So give yourself a few minutes to kind of play around with that. Make adjustments. If you're not making adjustments, you're probably doing something wrong. Okay? So fixing and tweaking are all really, really good signs. And now I'm going to go back through and lift it back up. And what you'll notice too, guys, I do keep these marks that I have on this line. I'll keep those marks on the paper for quite a while. Now the thing that kind of makes, I think, art so scary for so many people is that when you see an art piece, a lot of times the only time you see it is at the end, when the artist is done with it, they're happy with it, and they're finished. What you don't see are all the failed attempts at that piece. What you don't see is the hot mess that it might have been at the beginning. You don't see their practices, their sketches, the revisions, the changes, the sections that they might have restarted and done again over and over again. So you don't see the struggle that they went through to get to that final product. So as a result, a lot of people think that if you do art, it should look right at the very beginning, and that cannot be so far from the truth. Drawing and art in general is just one big experiment. You just have to go in with it with an open mind, and again, the way that I approach it is I'm banking on the fact that everything that I have right here, even right now, is wrong. But I'm not going to be worried about it because I know that as I work through the drawing, I'll figure out how to fix it. So to me, all of this is temporary. But I won't know how to fix it if I don't give myself something to play with. So I do have a lot of times kids will happen sometimes that they'll sit there and they'll be staring at a blank piece of paper and they're like, I can't do it, you know. Well, I'm like, well, you're not going to be able to do it if you don't put something down on the paper first and give yourself something to play with. Put something down and then play with it. Okay, so now we've got that. At least a start, okay? And is this stuff going to change? Oh, yeah, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of keep working our way up. So if you guys look, and I'm going to kind of zoom out on this so we can see my shoe a little bit better. So I've got the sole here. I've got some of this fancy stuff. I've got pink section, I've got a white section, and this gray section right here. Remember when we did that modified contour drawing, we did not deal with any details. And we are going to skip all our details until the very end of the project. Because again, we don't want to invest any time into details until we're certain that everything is in the right spot. Okay? It's just called good time management. Okay? Plus, if we keep everything simple, we will be more likely to actually fix it rather than just kind of looking at it and not wanting to erase it because of all that detail we put in it. That's what we call denial. So, all right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically ignore all of these details here. All I want to do is figure out where the top of this is and just kind of build a big shape for it. I'll go back in and cut it down later. I'll cut it down later once I get the rest of the shoe actually boxed in. Okay? So, because we're doing these shoes primarily from or life size and direct observation, a lot of you guys whose shoe was just the right size for your paper will be able to measure directly from the shoe onto your paper to determine just how tall that section needs to be. Okay? Those of you who had shoes that were too wide or wider than your paper will have to kind of shorten and kind of minimize some of those measurements. Okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back. So if you guys look, so this is my midpoint. This is, and then what I'm going to do is at that middle point, I'm going to measure just how tall, and I'm going to just use my fingers like this. How tall is my shoe, or the sole of the shoe, at that midpoint? And then all I'm going to do is take that measurement and mark it down right here. So I just went directly from my shoe to my paper. I'm going to do that again. Yeah, because I think I made it too big. I did. And I always double check my measurements because sometimes, like traveling from the shoe to the drawing, I mess things up. All right, so I'm also going to do that to those other points that I had. So again, this is the half mark. If you want to, you can mark these very lightly on your drawing. So that's the front fourth, that's half, and that's 3/4. So what I'm going to do now is go find that first mark where it is on my shoe, and again, I just divide the front half and half again. That's how tall that section is. I'm going to measure and mark. So I'm going to do that all along my shoe at those marks. So I've got 3 marks here. I'll give you guys a chance to do that. I'll zoom in so it's a little bit easier to see. So again, these marks represent just how tall that sole of the shoe is, which is incorporating for me like actually 3 different colors. I've got a pink section, I've got a white section, and a gray section to deal with. So then the next thing for me to do is I'm just going to play connect the dots, if you guys ever did one of those drawings. I'm going to connect these 3. You want to make sure that you're looking at your shoe, because there are things that are happening different in between those marks. So you can see I initially connected and now I'm playing with them. Now I'm playing. And I kind of fiddle around with these a little bit until I kind of like what I see or think that it's close to what I need. But again, I know that probably 95% chance that I will be changing this somewhere down the line of this drawing. And that's okay. Now, how to finish this off? What you can do is you can even break down your shoe even again if you want to. So you can break that back fourth, or the last section back here, in half again. can measure again. And you notice I still haven't like capped off the front or the back of the shoe. That's because I'm not ready for it. So I'm just leaving them open. And again, I just kind of play around with it. I keep my sketch lines, and this is just me. This is how I do it, and I find that works best for me. I keep these lines, I kind of draw them on pretty thick, and then I play with them with my eraser, just kind of carving out and shaping it up. Now I guarantee you guys, I've drawn this shoe a few times, that this version will look different than the version I did last year. I'm going to be drawing this shoe 3 times because I have 3 Fine Art 1 shoes or classes, and each one of these shoes will probably be slightly different. I'm not a robot, so. Okay. So if you guys remember again, you know, our back part of our shoe right here lifts off the ground, and so does the front. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of cap these ends off, okay? So let me kind of zoom in to the back so you can see this. Make sure I keep it high for those of you in the back. All right. So when I look at the back of my shoe, it pops out pretty good. I mean, it pops out actually a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of cap it off like this. Actually, and see how I'm playing with this? I've got a couple lines already I don't like. I'm just drawing over them and just playing around with that until I like it. And then I erase what I don't want. And then I'm going to continue to play with it. Got a couple like angles that are popping out here, so. Okay. And again, it leads me to play around with other parts here. I'm still kind of playing around with this curve. Normal. And everybody's shoe's designed differently, so your shoe's going to have a different kind of cap to it in the back. And now the next thing I'm going to do is deal with the front. Now the front, I have this like toe guard. So a lot of you guys probably have that toe guard, so I do need to make sure I include that, okay? So, but I'm still not, like I'm not breaking up these different sections. I don't have the black section separate from the white, from the gray. To me, all of this is all one space right now. I will break that down later. If I do it now, it's a waste of time because, again, I'm probably going to be changing it. So I'm going to draw that part now. So I'm basically looking at all 3 sections that I have there is just one big section for right now. And again, I'm looking at just the angles and the shape. You can even measure how tall it is if you want to. There we go. Because we're doing life size. So if you're ever in doubt about how tall or wide something needs to be, you can just measure on the actual shoe and put it on your paper. And then mine kind of curves around. Again, it's all about playing. Play, play, play. I'm going to erase and then play some more with it. And again, I'm not going into great detail. I'm not even breaking it up. This is a different color than the rest of the sole of the shoe. I'm not doing any of that yet because, again, I'm banking on the fact that this is wrong and I'm going to be fixing it. So that's all I'm going to do for that right now. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to make this a little bit wider. Don't like that. So I'm even still playing. So that's what I've got so far. And again, remember what my shoe looks like. I've got a pink section, I've got a white section, I've got a gray section. I even have this black for the toe guard, and it comes around here and I get a lot of tread. I don't have any of that on there yet. I'm not ready for it. This is just the beginning. Talking basic. This is just the framework. It's like building a house, guys. When you build a house, you just have all the framework up, right? You don't have walls, you don't have sinks, you don't have cabinets or countertops. This is it. This is the framework of the drawing. We'll put in the cabinets and the sinks and the walls in later. Now what I can do, now we're just going to keep moving our way up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure, I'm literally going to take my hands, measure how tall this back section is from the top of the sole of my shoe where I ended my drawing to the very top of this, and I'm just going to take this measurement and put it right here. Mark it right there. And then I always remeasure. Always double check. Okay. So again, I took this measurement, put it down right here. I want to see how tall that is, the back of the shoe. Now if you guys notice on the shoe, if you look, the back of the shoe is not my farthest edge, is it? If you look, the sole of the shoe sticks out farther than the back. So I need to make sure that this is inside that, and this is the farthest edge, okay? So and I've got that so far, okay? And I can already tell I need to change this angle, see? See what happens? I look and then I got to fix. This is what I mean. This is why you don't do any detail at the beginning. You want to be able to fix it. Okay. So I want to make sure I'm going to start this right here, and all I'm going to do so I'm just going to start here. I'm going to kind of see how it's kind of rounded here. I'm making these two different sections, rounding out here. Because if you look, it's round because it's trying to contour the back of your heel, and then I'm just going to go up to that mark. Actually, I need to angle it more in. And even too, some of your guys' shoes, it really angles in this way. So that is supposedly how tall the back of my shoe is. And again, after I draw it initially, I play with it. Play. Again, I'm still playing with this. And I hope you guys can see just how much I am changing and tweaking and playing with this. This is how you work on this stuff. It doesn't just show up right on the first mark at all. Sometimes it takes several attempts. All right, so now what I want to do, we're actually going to, see how, if I can, I want to figure out where the front edge is or how low this is, okay? So again, I am going to go back to where my middle is. If I divide this up, I'm going to try to get this so it does this. So I'm going to divide this in half. That's where one of my marks is, right there, okay? I'm going to measure just how thick this area is or how tall it is from here to here. So I'm going to work off the sole of the shoe. I'm going to measure from where I ended on the sole to up here. So I'm going to take this measurement and I'm going to put it right in line with that mark because that's where I'm measuring. Okay, I'm just going to put a mark there. So again, I went back to my shoe. Okay, divide it in half. That's right here. That represents this mark right here. And I'm going to measure how tall it is right there, and I put it right there. I actually need to, I think it's fine. Actually, I need to make this higher. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to also, here's the thing, I want to figure out where this is, this tall part here in the front. Okay? So when I look at my shoe, I'm going to divide it in half again. Okay, so I'm looking at the back half. Divide that, so this part is not in the middle, okay? It's actually about, so it's right here. So now I need to put these lines up. So go ahead and draw these lines up. Actually, and I just noticed because I did that I don't have that mark in the right spot. I need to put that mark there. So draw these marks up because we're going to need these. Now we're starting to do plumb and level. This is all about how things are aligned, okay? Measured there. So when I look at where my midpoint is, which for me, my midpoint is represented by this shoelace hole right here. That high part is this far away from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure that. I'm going to mark off just how much farther away it is from it. So it's here. I don't know how tall it is yet. But this is where it's aligned. Again, so this shoelace represents my midpoint. I'm going to measure off of that to see where this high part is in the front, measuring right off of that. I measure off of that mark that I have for the midpoint, and that's where I have that line. So the next thing is now I need to figure out just how tall this section is. So I'm going to measure from here down to where I ended on my sole of my shoe, measure it, and mark it. I'll do that again. So I took my shoe, I measured from where I ended with the sole of the shoe, so I'm measuring off of that. to the top of this, and all I did was marked it on there. And marked it. So that's where that high point is. Now, I can draw it in. So I can connect these two dots. Now again, there's stuff happening in the middle here. I'm just going to connect them real general. And then I'm going to really look at my shoe and fix it up to determine, and I'm going to make my changes, and it's determined by what I see here. Start this little dip here. Now start curving up. I don't know where this is going to go yet. I'm just going to kind of leave it open right there. Okay. That's where we're going to end today, guys. All right, so let me stop this.